Everyone. On behalf of the Department of BCom Information System Management, Sri Krishnaswamy College, I am much excited to extend a very warm and ardent welcome to each and every one of you for the 5 days International Faculty Development Program, Idea to Impact Research Proposal Development and Funding Strategy. I am Dr. S. Subbalakshmi, Assistant Professor, and I will be your host for the day. It is a mark of our undying tradition to invoke the Almighty at the beginning of any event. Today, as we gather together here, I pray to the Almighty to fill all our hearts with joy and all our minds with learning. May the Almighty anoint our creativity, our ideas, and our energy so that we accomplish even the hardest of all tasks. With this note of prayer, let's begin the event. It is an essential aspect of welcoming and expressing gratitude towards the people who joined and became a part of the ceremony today. May I now request Ms. Anubala, Head Department of BCom Information System Management, to welcome the gathering.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
A very good afternoon to one and all. The Department of BCom Information System Management is highly privileged to organize this 5 days International Faculty Development Program with our esteemed guest speakers from various national and international colleges and institutions. I am Ms. Anubala, deem it as an honor to present the welcome address and welcome each one of you with an open arms and hearts on this occasion. I take this opportunity to welcome the pillars of our support, our director sirs, Shri K.B. Rajmohan sir, Shri K.B. Arun sir, Shri K.B.K. Krishna Anand sir, and our principal ma'am, Dr. Anita Rajendran ma'am. I extend our warmest greetings and heartfelt welcome to our resource person, Dr. Anbupalam Thalamuthu. He is a senior research fellow from the Center of Health Brain Aging, Sheba, the University of Wales, Sydney. I also extend a very special welcome to all the faculty members from various departments and various colleges who have joined us through YouTube. We are glad that you have all gathered here on this special occasion. We hope you will find this FDP to be fruitful and engaging. Thank you and welcome you all once
again. Shall I go on?
Over to you,
To me, yeah?
Over to you, Subbalakshmi ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am, for your warm words of welcome. Today, as a part of the 5-day International Faculty Development Program, Idea to Impact Research Proposal Development and Funding Strategy, we have gathered here for a session on statistics sections in grant applications. To speak on this topic, today we have with us a well-experienced faculty, Dr. Anbupalam Thalamuthu, Senior Research Fellow from Center for Healthy Brain Aging, University of New South Wales, Sydney. I deem it is a great honor to introduce our speaker for the day, Dr. Anbupalam Thalamuthu. Dr. Anbupalam completed his undergraduate from the Bharatiyar University, postgraduate MPhil and PhD from University of Madras, postdoctoral research from University of Pittsburgh, USA. He worked as a lecturer in the Department of Statistics, Presidency College, Chennai, and also the University of Madras in Chennai, and a senior research scientist in Genome Institute of Singapore. Now he is working as a senior research fellow at the Center for Healthy Brain Aging, University of New South Wales, Sydney. He is a statistician with several years of experience in genetic and epidemiological data analysis. He has many years of teaching and research experience from his current and previous appointments. Dr. Anbupalam has written several methodological articles on genetic association studies. He has also analyzed several GWAS on age-related phenotypes and contributed to the meta-analysis of GWAS studies. Currently, he is the lead statistician at Center for Healthy Brain Aging, responsible for design, analysis, and interpretation of results on multiple projects in genetic epidemiology, neuroepidemiology, neuroimaging, and proteomics based on three cohort studies: the older Australian twin study, the Sydney memory and aging study, and the Sydney centenarian study. He also provides results from Sheba cohorts to several other consortia studies, such as cohorts for heart and aging research in genomic epidemiology, enhancing neuroimaging genetics through meta analysis, brain imaging, cognition, dementia, and next generation genomics, a transdisciplinary approach to search for risk and protective factors of neurodegenerative disease, and cohort studies of memory in an international consortium. Overall, Dr. Anbupalam Thalamuthu has co-authored over 160 peer-reviewed journal articles with a H index of 59 and 17,116 citations. With due respect, we welcome you, sir, and it's a real privilege to have you with us today. I request you to kindly take over the session, sir.
Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for the invitation. Can you see my slides? Is it visible? Hello? Okay, yeah, thanks. I think it's coming now. Yeah, my name is Anbupalam Thalamuthu, Anbu for short. I am a senior research fellow at the Center for Healthy Brain Aging. It's called CHIBA for short. It is an institution within the University of New South Wales, Sydney. This is the first time I'm talking about something like stats section in grant applications. So let's see how we go. And as you are aware of, it's generally difficult, like in many other countries, getting funding is not that easy. So I've been part of several funding applications from my center, and few successful ones as well. I've written a lot of stat section in grant applications as well as in randomized controlled trials, because I also, let's say, consult for a RCT consulting firm, randomized clinical trial firm. So my experiences are all on public health and medicine related ones, and I have not done much research in the area of economics or commerce. So whatever I'm going to show today would be mostly focused on health related ones. Excuse me for that, but of course I'll highlight the important points in stats section. The first thing I would like to do is to introduce my research center just for 5 minutes, and say what kind of data we have, and because these data sets are available to people around the world, and therefore I'm spending a few minutes of time to explain what we are doing. So the Center for Healthy Brain Aging is a multidisciplinary center where we have a few ongoing as well as completed epidemiological cohort studies. For example, one of the studies called Sydney Memory and Aging Study, which is also called MASS, um, is a cohort study which is going for like more than 15 years now, and these are all like older sample around people aged 70 plus, followed up for nearly now 15 years, maybe more than 15 years, and the sample size is around 1,000 at the baseline when we recruited these participants. And also that we have another study called Older Australian Twin Study, where we recruited around 600 twin participants, around 380 plus 300 plus twin pairs, which is also a cohort study going on for nearly more than 10 years now. And Sydney Centenarian Study, which is a study of centenarians, which is also cohort study. We have around 400 sample recruited at the baseline. And we also started looking at Sydney Memory and Aging Study 2, which is recruiting participants after 10, 15 years of the same age group and with similar experimental setting. So we have a comprehensive medical history functional test, that is your ability to do perform normal functions, day-to-day functions, as well as physical functions, medical examination, cognitive battery of tests, and we have genetic, proteomic, and epigenetic markers on some of the subsets of these samples I have listed above. So, and we have also collected blood, serum, plasma, and stored for future use as well. And we do have brain donations from these cohorts, and we have done some brain tissue-based genetic and epigenetic analysis from a subset of participants from these cohorts who died, as well as from other biobanks around the world. Uh, so the data set is very rich, and this is available for all the researchers around the world if you make an application. So if you are really interested in these data sets, I'm happy to help you to get this data and work on it. So Chiba has a few research groups, and I am associated with genetic and epigenetics group. And we have neuroimaging, neuropsychology, psychiatry, molecular biomarkers group, and epidemiology groups. And being a statistician in this institute, I work on various projects from all these groups. And yeah, so I have a lot of experience on analyzing these data sets from these cohorts. Of course, our group, as genetic and epigenetic group, is not a very big group. It's a very small team. Like, for example, I'm a statistician, and this is Karen is the PI or group leader for our group, and we have like a few students as well, and one or two RAs. So, but our interest is to gain better understanding of the genetic and transcriptomic and epigenetic factors for aging, as well as age-related decline, as well as age-related diseases, with the main focus on brain-related disorders. Okay, so let's move on to the stats section. Usually, the stats section is the last section in mostly the last section in a grant proposal. But unfortunately, I have to give this at the beginning of this DP workshop, and I'll have to touch upon few more things as we go on. So, in fact, stats section or statistic analysis protocol development, power calculation, all these things. That stats section can itself be a course, full semester course. But let's see how I'll touch upon few aspects of writing the grant proposal. Okay. So first of all, why do we apply for grants in academic research? So we just don't apply for just for money, but we want to make we want to show that the research is feasible as well as credible, and in an independent research, it's going to be impactful and sustainable, both for the PI or the person who writes the grant proposal, and for his maybe his teams, and as well as the students, and for the academic system in an institution or the academic system in a country as a whole. So this is not just for getting money. So you have to be serious that you are trying to do some useful research for the society. That's the major thrust here. And then, so when you want to get money from a grant agency, naturally you'll have to sell your research ideas. Okay, but the buyers are not like just common men. So these are common people. These are like intelligent buyers, the reviewers usually. So they analyze your product carefully, and then mark down your grant, and then finally you make a successful application. So therefore, the selling point has to be very strong. It has to be scientifically sound. That's what we want to look at in stat section as well as in general sections. Okay, so major types of grants can be something like this. For example, you have something called research project grants, which will be the major type of grant we usually go for. And of course, in some countries, there are like early career or career development grants as well. Of course, you may know of fellowships in India and every other countries. And sometimes we apply for what is known as program grants, which are in some sense are large scale, and there can be like seed grants or pilot grants where you want to showcase your research idea in a preliminary data set, and then you can also ask money for building infrastructure, buying new equipments, depending on the agency which are going approaching for. And then there can be training and education grant, and also sometimes some countries, some universities even give you collaborative and network grant money. And then you also have translational innovation and commercialization grants. Some universities, some grant bodies are very much interested in this because it allows you to make money and popularize your product. And of course, we can also apply for conference and travel grant and mobility grants in general. So various types of grants one can visualize. Not all the grants need a stats section, as you are aware of. Most of the time, whenever you collect the real data in your grant application, in your experimental design, then naturally you should, when you want to analyze these data sets, you may have a grant section, I mean the stats section in your application. Okay, that's what we are going to see today. So maybe before I elaborate on this grants, I mean stats section, maybe I'll highlight few types of I mean grants, and then we move on from there. So the first thing you would like to, I mean, is the major type is the research project grants, where you have a specific research project with the defined aims, and it's like a fixed duration project, usually from 1 to 5 years. I mean, grant bodies usually don't give you like more than 5 years research grant. Of course, it can be extended, but usually the time period is restricted in most of the cases. So this should have like clearly defined objectives, methods, and outcomes. And usually it's led by a PI, one person called principal investigator. Of course, you will have a lot of co-investigators, and some of these examples are like NIH, USA, NIH, National Institute of Health, RO1 grants. Probably it's going to be very difficult to get funding from ROI from US, and NHMRC, which is the Australian grant body. NHMRC is Medical Research Council, and then Australian Research Council, which is another body. Like you in India, you have like ICMR, DST, UGC. I don't know what's the scenario now. I don't have much experience in a grant application in India, so please excuse me if I'm not giving you the Indian scenario per se. But of course, the stat structure is going to be similar in most of the instances. Okay, so the next design is okay. So when you apply for a grant funding, so you should know that how our grants are evaluated. Probably you may have some experience, but the thing is, each grant body evaluates in slightly different manner, but most of the things are covered here. For example, It's the first one is the research quality or scientific merit. So that's the major focus in most of the grant evaluations. So how good is your grant? What is the scientific merit of it? Okay, and that covers even the stats section here. And the significance, whether the research you are making is going to be really significant for the society, or the trust areas for which the funding body is awarding money to you. So, the significance of the project, and of course, innovation and creativity. And I see a lot of, I think your FDP has lot components of AI into it. Maybe you don't have to rely on innovation and creativity for AI, but of course you can use AIs to support your, let's say, getting relevant research, and then looking at other similar application things like that. But I wouldn't suggest you to go to AI to create an idea for you to make a grant. Of course, I've used few AI generated slides and text here, but not the slides per se. So try to avoid using, depending on AI generated research proposal fully. So you have to have significant component, otherwise it doesn't make sense. At least that's my perception. People may have different interpretation as well. So and then it is also evaluated like based on the capability and investigator, uh, investigators quality. So for example, and the environment in which it's conducted. Okay, so usually having a good collaborated team in your project is very important. But I don't have, I have very limited experience in looking at grant proposals from India. At least here, I know, for example, like there'll be like 10 up to 10 co-investigators, depending on the limitation from the funding bodies. But usually it will be like a team of people. So try to have a collaborative team that will help you to give you, get good scores. And of course, there are like other aspects like impact and outcome fit to the funding call, like whether how appropriate is your proposal to the funding call per se. And of course, you can't ask for a lot of money, and people also judge based on value for money. And of course, you will also give a proper outline of the project planning and timeline, and that's important. Okay, uh, so the stats section uh, is concerned with the quality of research and design methods. Okay, for example, the core question is, will the approach actually answer the question or the aims of your proposal? So that's what you're trying to address in stat section, other design aspects of it. Okay, so stat section actually talks about appropriateness of the methodology. Are these methods suitable for the research aims you have mentioned? And about the rigor and robustness, sound study design, and proper controls if necessary. And similarly, what is the sampling plan, and very clear analysis plan. All these things should be there in the stats section, and that's what we will see a few highlights of this one. The first one is like the research design. So, for example, there are like several research design, which depends on the research question or the discipline of where the funding proposal is generated. Like, for example, we have the experimental, observational, mixed, data-driven, theoretical as well, design-based. There are many types of research design. Of course, this is generated by ChatGPT. Look at how beautifully it generated when you ask for this design concepts. Okay. Uh, So we will see one or two research designs, maybe which may be suitable for your proposal. The reviewers evaluate not just what design is used, but why it is appropriate and how rigorously it will be implemented. That's the key. So it's not just what design you can't just like that say that I'm going to use this design. Let explain why it is appropriate and how this is going to be done. Okay, so and the experimental design is another design where you perform an experiment. For example, it can be a clinical trial, or it can be a chemical experiment, or it can be a physical experiment. So, what the main idea is that you want to show the causal relationship by analyzing the data comes out of this experiment. So, the causal relation is like one causes the other. So, this is usually done using randomized assignment or randomized control design. And of course, you should have the pre-specified outcomes mentioned. So this is a RCT, randomized control trial. As I mentioned, it can be laboratory experiment, field experiment, or quasi experiments where randomization is very limited. If we can't do the randomization, then can be like a quasi experiment. So in general, it is like used in medicine, psychology, economics, and education and biology fields. So the reviewers actually look for internal validity, ethical consideration. The ethics is very important, especially when it involves animals and humans. Ethical consideration is very, very important. And of course, people look for statistical power and sample size calculations. We'll see why we need to do power calculations. So in other studies, other design, what is known as an observational or non-experimental designs. So there is no like a random assignment happening in this type of design. So it's the real world scenario. For example, it can be like a cohort study, like what we have. We recruit certain number of people and observe them over a period of time to see whether what we are interested occurs in the cohort. Or it can be cross-sectional case control study design where you look for people affected by some condition and the relevant control, and then you want to compare certain parameters between these people. So it can be like a cross-sectional study, like not necessarily case control, but it's a survey at one time points. So then you collect the data from this cross-sectional cohort and then analyze those data. Okay. So and it can be also longitudinal studies like what we have. So you observe them over a period of time and then collect repeated measurements on certain parameters, and then you want to establish causality of happening something. Okay, so this is a very, very popular experimental design. So like public health, sociology, epidemiology, and political science. So of course reviewers look for bias control and confounding variables and justification of the approaches in the experimental design you have chosen. Okay, and this is another very, very common research design where you look for secondary data or archived data, and then you analyze the already existing data by either doing meta-analysis, systematic reviews of already published literature, or bibliometric metrics, looking at how many publications or what is the number of papers published in certain areas, things like that. And you can also analyze archival documents in like in history experiments. So, so this is again like can be applied in many, many areas of research. This is one of the very common approach taken by social science people in India. So you analyze the secondary data and try to publish. But of course, that's a very good thing to do, starting point. Especially you can do like a meta-analysis and get some good publication, and also you try to get the understand the already existing literature Of course, meta-analysis can be taught as a separate course as well, because it involves a lot of statistical modeling. So it'd be good to know all those things. And coming to the stats section, so why do we have stats section in an application? Because we want to demonstrate the rigor and feasibility. That's the number one. And then we want to show that the stats section really aligns with the designs, hypothesis, and the analysis methods used here. And similarly, the most important thing is as well the transparency and reproducibility. Somebody who reads your grant proposal or reads your manuscript, for example, should be able to understand the full methodology, as well as able to, let's say, reproduce the results presented in your paper or in the grant proposal, grant outcome. So should be transparent reporting, should have a complete coding, complete stats section, etc. Okay. And of course, that increase reviewers' confidence in study validity. If you have followed the criteria very carefully, then the reviewers have confidence in your uh, proposal. Okay. The core components of the stats section are the objectives. Of course, the PI, OPIs generate the objectives and hypotheses, but it's not that you can just use that objectives in the proposal as such, because it has to be like a testable hypothesis and objectives, and therefore, yeah, the stats section will slightly reformulate these things and then present it in a analyzable manner. And then study design description, of course, sample size, power calculation, which is also the major part people look, the reviewers look for, and a clear statistical analysis plan, which would of course include how will you handle the missing data if it arises in your research, and also interim analysis if applicable. Most of the clinical trials would have a component of interim analysis, which means that you will do the analysis not at the end of the research proposal, in between also. For example, if it's a longitudinal study, you may want to analyze the data and report it before the full uh, uh, grant period is done. And of course, you will also have sections on sensitivity, and then how you do the subgroup analysis. And there is another important component which is called data management and reproducibility. We'll discuss slightly about that as well. Coming to the objectives and hypothesis per se, so I would suggest in general that you don't have too many primary and secondary objectives or hypotheses. Okay, the less the number is better. Maybe like three or maximum four. I mean, you can have too many, but it can be like a secondary, not like a primary hypothesis. So primary number of, if you have more number of primary hypotheses as well, then it also increases the multiple hypothesis test, and therefore you need a lot of power and a lot of sample. So keep the main objectives simple, and also this the hypothesis should be like a measurable and testable hypothesis. For example, let's say adults with high perceived stress. Perceived stress is the one you think that you are stressed, have higher blood pressure than adults with low perceived stress. Meaning, so stress increases like something like blood pressure, or increased blood pressure has stress leads to stress. So again, so this would be like a testable. It can be testable because we say the stress level and then blood pressure can be measured at the same time. That's more important. And you can also compare the two groups, like people with high and low perceived stress. Okay, so therefore comparison is possible, statistical comparison is possible, and it does not claim causality, whether a high stress leads to blood pressure or high blood pressure leads to high stress. So we don't talk about causality here. And another thing is, for example, the one which cannot be like testable in a cross-sectional study is that, for example, high sugar intake causes obesity in adults. So here the main point is causality, like sugar intake leads to obesity. This is the statement you're making. But if it's a cross-sectional study, it cannot be tested. Why? Because it implies causality and it requires evidence that exposure is the sugar intake, precedes the outcome, obesity in adults outcome. When you measure in a one time point, you can't establish this causality because we are observing at the same time. Therefore, cross-sectional data cannot establish temporality or causality. Okay, so statistical models and methods used here should align with your objectives and hypotheses. That's what is important. Maybe I have some example to show that as well, but let's see. And So they like primary and secondary endpoints in a proposal is important. Endpoint means what is that you are going to measure to validate your hypothesis or make your claim true. So that means, for example, if your study question is like, what is the effect of minimum wage increase on workers, then the primary endpoint can be like average hourly wage of low skilled workers. So look at all these important bits here. It's like hourly wage. So the endpoint is hourly wage. Endpoint is clearly mentions that it is hourly. So it's not like weekly, it's not like monthly. So this has to be clearly spelled. And then you are also saying that you're looking at low skilled workers. Okay. So the endpoint has to be clearly mentioning about the data you are going to measure. That's the point of saying about primary and secondary endpoint. That also determines the population parameter you're going to test. Okay. And similarly, the number of hours worked per week. For example, the secondary endpoints can be employment rate among low skilled workers, number of hours worked per week. All these things can be secondary, but primary you will have the one which is the main focus will be spelled clearly. Okay, so for example, I have a slide to show how the hypothesis actually translated, and then we write the method section. This is a recent thing I did it recently. So, but of course, I don't want you to understand every bit of this slide. It's too messy. But what I try to say that the primary investigator actually gives you a hypothesis like something like, for example, cognitive impairment in CADASIL. CADASIL is a inherited brain disorder which affects the brain blood vessels. It's a genetic disorder. And what the primary, I mean, the hypothesis one, the PI is trying to say is that among the people with this brain disorder, cognitive impairment is primarily in executive function. Executive function is one of the domains of cognition we measure, similar to sporadic VCD. That is another comparison group here as compared with other domains. So this is like a complex sentence people make in uh, proposal. The PIs write this. So the main point for a statistician or in the stats section is to translate this into testable statistical method. So, for example, you will say comparing between the two groups, for example, Cardiac versus controls or post-stroke, that's another subgroup within this proposal. So, what you do is like, for example, because this person says that impairment will be primarily in executive function compared with other domains, that means you say how many people impaired in executive function domain compared to other domains. So you translate these into a testable, measurable variable, and also propose methods appropriate for this. So that's what is shown in this. For each of these hypotheses, we translate this into various testable, various measurable characteristics, as well as we clearly say what the each hypothesis will be tested using what kind of statistical method. Of course, you can see these are all very basic methodology, except this Poisson regression mentioned here. And of course, you will see for each of these hypotheses and methods used, you will say what is the power calculation given the sample size, or you will say what is the sample size needed for a particular power. I'll talk about this a little bit later. So this is what I'm trying to say, that you will have to translate the hypothesis in a meaningful one and use appropriate statistical methodology. Okay. So why do we do sample size calculation? Because the design should be like, I mean, analysis should be sound, scientifically sound, feasible, and and it is a responsible use of funds. Okay, evidence that the study can realistically answer research question without wasting the researchers or exposing participants unnecessarily. If it's a very tiresome randomized design, then you don't want to take too many people and expose them to risk. Like, for example, it can be a treatment, medicine, new medicine. Okay. And of course, you want to demonstrate scientific validity. So, for example, power calculations show that study designed to detect a meaningful effect if it truly exists. Okay, that's why we want to do the power calculation. Underpowered study may fail to find a real effect. It's something called false negatives. An overpowered study may detect trivial effects, which may not be practical or clinical importance. Okay, so you should have just enough number of people in your study to demonstrate the scientific validity, and that is because you don't want to waste a lot of resources. The funding agencies maximize the scientific impact, and the studies that are uh, too small risk producing inconclusive results. If it is too small, you cannot have a meaningful result. So overly large studies is a waste of time, money, and personnel. So power calculations are done to show that the applicant has carefully done a balanced power calculation to show scientific rigor, cost, and efficiency. Okay, so the power actually depends on various factors. For example, the power depends on the effect size. Effect size is the difference, for example, you will expect to see when you're comparing groups, something like that, or in a regression model, what will be your expected beta. This can be observed from previous literature, or if you have done any pilot study, you can also use that. And of course, you should have assumption about the variances in most of the power calculations, because the power calculation depends on the variance of the estimate you are going to use. And of course, the significance level and the power itself, or the 1 minus type 1 error, the type 1 error, type 2 error, which are important parameters for power calculations. So, and the statisticians usually base some significance level depending on the number of hypotheses tested. If it is like, let's say, only one hypothesis, then we'll say, okay, at 5% level for 80% power, what is the sample size required? Or given the sample size, what is the power you will get in your design? So something like that. And you should also account for attrition estimates, meaning how many people you are going to lose in your data collection. And you will also mention the various power correlation softwares available in the market. For example, SAS and PASS or like paid licensed software, G-Power and R, or of course free software, you can use them. Usually, it's better to provide a power calculation with a figure like this. For example, on your x-axis, you will say for various effect sizes, possible effect sizes, what is the power, observable power. For example, in here, I have shown various groups of sample or for various sample sizes with the estimate increase, how the power goes up. So the reviewer would get an idea of how many samples would give you enough reasonable power for the study. And of course, you will clearly mention how you did this power calculation for this analysis. Okay, but of course, these two are not the same. But I am just showing you. You will clearly mention what is the methodology used, what is the software used for calculating, and what is the sample size, the lower spectrum, and the higher spectrum as well if possible. And also you will say how many is the attrition rate, and then with an attrition rate of 10%, you'll jack up the number. So these are very, very important aspects of power calculation. And of course, the statistical analysis plan will have primary analysis model, secondary analysis model, and what are the covariates you're going to use in your analysis, and of course assumption checking. Okay, how will you handle the various statistical assumptions made in your models, whether you're going to make the transformation or you're going to use alternative models. All these things should be there. And of course, if you have too many hypotheses in your proposal, then you will have to address the multiple comparison, which is the amount of correction you will have to make in the probability of type 1 error when you are testing for too many hypotheses. Okay, and also of course you will have to specify handling of the missing data. This has got a very detailed information here. I'm not going to go into this one because of the time constraint, but what I'm going to say that is that there are various types of missing data, and you are like, for example, missing completely at random, missing at random, and missing not at random. These are various types of missing data mechanisms that the study can expect. And the statistical model you are presenting in your stats section should clearly address these things, how you are going to do it. Okay, so that's also another important point. And of course, you will say sensitivity and subgroup analysis. Sensitivity analysis or something like that. You, for example, you have a predefined hypothesis, you have predefined subgroups for analysis with predefined conditions or assumptions you have. And in subgroup analysis, for example, if there is a violation of the assumption you are making, or if this particular subgroup is gone, what happens to your study results? So this is called something like sensitivity analysis, where you test the robustness of your study design as well as the results you're going to make. So you will, under the sensitivity and subgroup analysis, you will make alternative models, and you will also say how you are going to handle the outliers, etc. Okay, so this is another important aspect of the stats section. So additional information about how you handle various other aspects of the study design. I'm not going to read everything in here, but the point is, in your analysis plan, you will say what kind of model, what is the parameter, like logistic regression model, generalized linear model, area under the curve, ROC curve, receiver operating curve, and mixed model, generalized linear mixed model. What happens with the interaction term, higher order term? All these things will be clearly defined in your proposal, which is the part of the statistician's job, and you'll have to make sure that these things happen. Okay, I'm not going to read through this for the time constraint. What I'm saying is, for example, you will say what are the regions or subgroups in your analysis, whether you're going to introduce interaction terms, or if you're using meta-analysis, whether you will specify whether you're going to use the type of meta-analysis you're going to use, things like that, confounding variables, and how will you take care of attrition, things like that. So these are very important part of the stats section. Be mindful of all these things. Another thing is like data storage, data management, and reproducibility. Data management is a very important aspect, especially in health research. For example, you will clearly specify how the data is going to be stored securely and not accessible to the public. And it is also multi-factor authenticated, things like that. And similarly, the quality control process of the data, and if you have to register your data like in a repository, you'll have to mention that, and then the code and workflow transparency are all should be clearly there in the stats section. Okay. And of course, there are like guidelines for you to follow depending on the grant body. For example, NIH has got grant policy statement, National Science Foundation has policies, ICMR has guidelines, and NHMRC has guidelines as well, like in Australia. And of course, you have the general concept guidelines, which tells you the reporting of trials, and also various ethical guidelines and ICH guidelines, and design and analysis of clinical trial is another, reference for you to follow the stats section. This is another good book for, I would say. And yeah, so this is the brief outline of all this stats section. You can think of course, I have to acknowledge my group leader and our central leader. I have already acknowledged the use of Chat GPT for generating some notes and figures, and of course, we for all our studies, we acknowledge the participants and their time, and of course the funding bodies. Okay. I think that's the end of the my talk, and I'll stop here, and I'll take if there are any questions. Thank you for listening to me, and feel free to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for keeping all of us engrossed throughout the lecture. It truly helped us to magnify our knowledge in the best possible way. Now, I request the participants to post their queries in the comment box.
Yeah, being all of you academic
I request the participants to post their questions in the comment box.
teachers, at least a few questions would make me happy that I made some points for you. Yeah. Probably participants don't have access to chat box or something. Chat.
They can't access the chat, sir, but they can definitely comments through the YouTube, sir.
No questions.
So we can see in
I
that
can't see
YouTube
that
comments.
comment, right?
Uh,
So one question is there. How do we find the actual sample size for the study?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's an
How do
interesting
we
thing.
find the actual sample size for the study?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was telling you about. I mean, sample size calculation is not that let's say simple, but you will have to make some assumption about the parameters, like various parameters I've talked about, like the effect sizes, and then the type 1 error, type 2 error, and the model we are using. So sample size calculation is somewhat involved, and I would suggest that you approach statisticians to do that, I mean, there are, of course, online calculators for simple procedures, but you will have to make sure that you're doing the correct thing. So, sample size calculation, you make use of statistical procedure and standard softwares and consult statisticians. Okay.
So one question from my side, that is too many hypotheses. I mean, for the research project, how there is chances of rejection on and all for that if we are having too many hypotheses.
I think there is some. Please, others, mute your mic because I can't
For
hear
research
her.
grant, if too many hypotheses are there, then there is chances of rejection of such a thing.
Sorry, sorry, ma'am, I couldn't hear you. But anyway, are you asking like too many hypotheses? Like you should,
Yeah, too many hypotheses.
yeah.
Then
Usually, the general tendency of the principal investigators is that they try to have lots of hypotheses because you're applying for funding, and you want to have a lot many hypotheses so that you think that the reviewers will be impressed because you want to look at all these aspects. Okay, but that may not be the case actually. When you have too many hypotheses, the first problem is that the statistical one. Okay, for example, uh, when you are testing too many primary hypotheses, it increases what is known as the false positives, meaning type 1 error. Okay, so the type 1 error is the probability of making a false discovery. Okay, so false discovery increases when you are testing lot many. Okay, so you have to account for that penalty of testing too many things. So that's number one. Number two is that when you have too many hypotheses, you're trying to accommodate too many things in the proposal, and it becomes very hard for the reviewer as well to understand the whole complexity. Okay, of course you can have a lot of other things listed in the secondary aims which you don't focus a lot, but you can briefly say, okay, this is the method I will be using, and these are not very important for my proposal per se. Okay, so don't have too many hypotheses, even though you think that you're making a very good proposal because you're looking at elaborately all these things. It's not the case. Okay, keep it simple, keep it focused, and try to impress on that particular unique point you're trying to make. Okay, that would be my suggestion. Okay.
thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other queries? No, sir. Thank you. Uh, I take this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks, being thankful and expressing gratitude to all who had been instrumental in the successful outcome of the event is an essential aspect of every program. First of all, I would like to give glory and thanks to the Almighty for making today's session a grand success. We are deeply indebted to thank our principal madam, Dr. Anita Rajendran, and our directors, Sri K.B. Rajmohan sir, Sri K.B. Arun sir, and Sri K.B. Krishnanand sir for their constant support. I would like to extend my gratitude to our esteemed guest speaker for the day, Dr. Anbupalam Thalamuthu, for accepting our invitation and gracing this occasion with his presence. Heartfelt thanks to the head of the department, Dr. Anubala Suresh, for her stewardship and all the faculty members of the Department of BCom Information System Management for their able guidance in facilitating this event. Finally, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all the participants for their active participation. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you. So I'm leaving
Thank
now.
you, sir.
Thank you. Bye.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.